Good morning, everyone. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here today and to be the closing speaker of this outstanding conference. I want to use this opportunity to thank everyone who was involved in the organization of the conference, the staff of Engineers Without Borders USA, the local organizing committee, the board, and all the volunteers who made this conference a true success, a true conference without borders, literally. I also want to thank all of you for taking time off from your busy schedules, students, professionals, retirees who came here and to exchange notes, to make new friends, to renew friendship, and share solutions for making the world a better place for all. I want to thank you, all of you, from the bottom of my heart. You are truly the, what we call the EWB generation. And as an elder, because I'm not as young as I used to be, I'm glad to see that the future of the engineering profession is in really good hands. As some of you know, Engineers Without Borders really started 7 years ago in about 2000, and some of you have heard that story before, but I'm going to tell it again. It started in my own backyard, and we bought a house, my wife and the kids and I, in 1997, and I needed some landscaping done, and I selected a landscaping company at random from the phone book, the yellow pages. Be careful about random processes because they can change your life. And in this case, it did. And so a few days later, some people from Belize working in Colorado came over and said, hey, we are here to do some landscaping. They told me about the needs of children in Belize and how I could be of help since I told them I was teaching at the university. I said yes, and 2 years went by. And in December of '99, I got an email from Angel Czech, who told me that, hey, I was in your backyard 2 years ago. It's time to deliver your promise. And then so I say, okay, I was on sabbatical that year, and then in March of 2000, I went to Belize and visited some villages, one of them being this village of San Pablo. 250 people live in there, mostly Mayan Indians in the middle of the jungle. And I came across this little girl and about 20 different little girls like her. Their job was essentially to carry water from the river located behind those houses to the village back and forth. As a result, they could not go to school. So that was the problem. And they say, hey, you're a civil engineer, why don't you design something? And I say, yes, no problem. And I can find a pump, that's not a problem, you know. We can find pumps there. But very quickly on my way back, as I was flying back to Colorado, I realized that, well, in the middle of the jungle, there's no electricity. That community is a community that makes about $1 a day. Essentially, they could not afford any fuel, and therefore I had to come up with a solution. So a simple problem became complex in a sense that had nothing to do with technology. It had to do with some form of implementation that was respectful of the culture and that would allow those people to survive and for those little girls to go to school. That's how it was presented to me. I had never done that. I'm a geotechnical engineer, and my job was essentially design of dams and tunnels, and all of a sudden I was faced with a very small project, small-scale engineering with a very high social impact. Nobody had taught me how to do that. I looked around and said, where on earth do we teach that kind of stuff in engineering schools? We don't. Essentially, the kind of engineering that we teach in engineering school is essentially for 1 billion rich people. There are essentially 5 billion people whose job is to try to stay alive by the end of the day, and for whom we don't know how to do engineering. We do not essentially teach engineering for those 5 billion people, and yet those 5 billion people are like you and me, and they need to survive. They have hope, they have dreams. And it is on their behalf that Engineers Without Borders USA was created. So we came back a year later and put a RAM pump, which is an old technology. The students essentially spent a whole year building the RAM pump from scrap metal. I had never heard of a RAM pump myself. So, and very quickly I became a student like the students. It's kind of interesting. And then a year later we installed that RAM pump. The RAM pump had some problems. We had to get another pump that had some problems, was hit by a hurricane of magnitude 4, and finally we came up with a completely different solution 2 or 3 times later on, which was to drill a well at the top of the village there, and then Colorado School of Mines chapter came over and installed a photovoltaic PV system to draw the water out of the well. What came out of this trip really changed my life for the better. For me, it was an epiphany, midlife awakening, not midlife crisis. And you often hear men having a midlife crisis where they either change job or change wife or change car. I did not do any of that. And instead, I changed essentially career and changed essentially my direction of engineering. So that was one outcome of this. Another outcome is that students were really excited at the time. They were still excited today, as you can see. And students say, hey, we are sick and tired of doing problems 5.1 to 5.10 at the end of chapter 5. Why don't we do some real engineering? And I told them, listen guys, I'm also sick and tired of giving you problems 5.1 to 5.10 at the end of chapter 5. So it's time that we train you to do some real engineering. And found out that in many engineering schools, we don't teach engineers to be engineers. We teach them to be essentially to know how to read books. And so some of them don't have a hard time reading too. But we don't teach the real world. So that came as a no-brainer that Engineers Without Borders essentially was a way of introducing real engineering, real practice, real design, real implementation into engineering curricula. And for me, it was just, it was wide open. Also, what I've learned there from this kind of engineering is that this kind of engineering is not the traditional engineering. It's not like you want to do an expansion of I-5 here. In the middle of the jungle, duct tape takes a different dimension. And the solutions there have to be really grassroots solutions. We don't teach, again, this kind of engineering, and it's about time that we change that. Because, as I mentioned earlier, we have some real issues on the planet. Those issues are here, and they are here to stay. This is the statistics about the planet, and some of you may have seen that slide before if I gave a presentation at your school there. But I want to repeat it over and over again, because many people on the planet, on planet Earth today, have no clue of what kind of planet they live on. I've noticed that some people who live in Boulder think that, students in Boulder think that the entire planet is like Boulder, Colorado. Well, it is not. I can guarantee you that. There are 1.2 billion people there who do not have clean water, 2.4 billion people who do not have good sanitation, 2.4 billion people at risk of malaria, 29,000 children who die for reasons that are purely preventable on a daily basis, okay? 1.2 billion people do not have adequate housing, 1.6 billion people do not have access to electricity, 4.2 billion people are unable to read. That's planet Earth at the beginning of the 21st century. Among all the people who suffer the most, and I can tell you, and some of you have noticed that, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that children and women in the world are suffering the most from all the stupid decisions that men have made over the past 3 million years. There are about 2.2 billion children in the world. More than half of them live in extreme deprivation associated with poverty, war, or AIDS. 29,000 die for reasons that are purely preventable every day. Those numbers, I'm very sensitive when I hear those numbers because they are not acceptable. They are a sign of a species that is completely screwed up. This is the sign of a species that is in complete denial of itself and in denial of denial. Those numbers are not acceptable, period. And if you don't like those numbers, let's do something about it. Let's not wait for those governments, those high political institutions to do anything about it. They all talk about it. God knows they all talk about it. I was in Afghanistan, just came back a few days ago, and I attended some UNDP meetings and all that stuff. All those guys are all well-dressed, and, they make good salaries and so on. And they talk about poverty as if it is an academic exercise. Poverty reduction. I hate the term poverty reduction, by the way. Who said that those people are poor? What about wealth enhancement instead of poverty reduction? Many people out there, all of us, are wealthy by the time we are born with a head, arms, legs, a way of thinking, a way of doing something. Poverty reduction, that sounds so much like a white man type of decision. You are poor. Oh, me, I'm poor. Yeah, well, you are poor. Come on, let's stop that nonsense, okay? I met some people who are, what kind of poverty are we talking about, by the way? Poverty of spirit or poverty of material poverty? I can tell you that I see more smiles in a small village in Africa or in Afghanistan, then I see smiles on campus over a period of 1 year. Who is poor on this planet? Who is developed? Who is developing? I'm not that impressed by essentially some 1 billion rich people who are always in search of better, bigger, larger, as if it's, they are never satisfied. I'm not impressed by that. To me, those people are poor. We in the West, in my opinion, are really poor in spirit. And as long as there will be poverty in spirit, there will be poverty in the real world. So if we want to do poverty reduction, let's start with reducing our own inner poverty, and then we can start talking about making the world a better place. I only have 20 minutes, so don't... Take as long as you need. Okay, yeah, but I have to catch a plane. Give you statistics there that I've mentioned to some of you before. In the world, in 2007, the entire world spent $1,054 billion on weapons. That's 1 trillion. You divide that by 365 days, you divide that by 24 hours, you divide that by 60 minutes, you divide that by 60 seconds. We are spending in the world today $31,000 a second on weapons. In Iraq alone, we have been spending about $100 billion a year for the past 5 years, which turns out to be $3,100 a second in Iraq alone. I read the other day that in order to bring clean water, sanitation, immunization, education to all the children in the world, it would only cost $40 billion, 10% of the defense budget of the United States. How come we don't do it? How come we as a species are in complete denial? I'm sick and tired of it. I don't know about you guys, and I'm sick and tired of it. It's time that we move from being a humanitarian organization to become social activists. I'm becoming more and more of a social activist, where I need to denounce this kind of nonsense wherever I go, especially to the young people who do not accept the status quo. We need to denounce inequality. We need to denounce poverty. We need to denounce corruption. Wherever you go, please stand up and speak up. Do something about it. We are the agents of change. Gandhi said that you don't like the world, you need to be the change that you want to see in the world. Bringing a pump at the middle of Africa is nothing. Anybody can do that. If all the problems in the world were technical, we would have solved them a long, long time ago. So yes, do your technical stuff. Let's do our technical stuff because we are good at it as engineers, but we need to become social activists. I'm not saying that you need to throw rockets at the White House. Don't do that. But you need to denounce. Those numbers don't speak highly of us as a species on a beautiful planet at the middle of the universe and the only planet that is populated on the entire universe. That just makes no sense whatsoever. Those numbers break my heart. I've seen children die in front of me. I've seen children blow up in front of me in Afghanistan. It is not a pretty picture for reasons that are purely preventable. So let's change the world. Let's make the world a better place. And here are some of the children there that you see along the road there. And here's a quote from J.F. Kennedy: "If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich." How do we turn around those young people in Israel and Palestine? Instead of throwing rocks at each other, maybe they want to throw books at each other. Work together. Empower them with creative ways of expressing healthy ways of expressing their creativity. We can do that. We do it with our own children. Why not doing it with the youth in the entire planet there? I'm calling on the elders in this room. Maybe the elders should spend less time on the golf courses and more time on helping those young people who seek advice and seek guidance and seek mentoring. So I'm calling on the elders in the room there stop writing the stupid technical papers that people don't read. Come on, we have killed enough trees with the same paper over and over again with a different title so we can get promotion and tenure. That's another insanity. So if I were an alien from another planet, I'd say, you guys are completely insane. Why are you writing the same paper over and over again to get, what, $1,000 extra at the end of the year? Well, it makes no sense to me. So to the elders, do something about it. Become mentors. Become agents of change. Especially for those of you who are retired. Hey, you have plenty of time on your hands. You have plenty of, well, some money. And also you have 30 or 40 years of experience. Young children in Israel, in Palestine, in Ghana, in the United States, in inner cities, in Native American communities, Native American tribes, they would love your guidance. Go for it. Walk the talk. Make the world a better place. The governments are not going to do it for you. The top is congested, by the way. The top is constipated. Okay, forget about the top. The transformation is from the bottom up. And I think that's the message that this organization is sending to the rest of the world, is that we are doing a transformation of the world for the better from the bottom up. These are some goals there that UN Millennium Development Goals that we need to take extremely seriously. The goals are to make the world a better place in 2015, maybe. But the bottom line is that we have goals. Whether or not we reach them in 2015, to me, is superfluous. But engineers have a role to play in reaching each one of those 8 goals, whether it is improving maternal health, whether it is reducing hunger, whether it is providing education to a child, and so on and so forth. Another issue that we need to worry about is that we have a population growth, there's no doubt about it, and we are going to expect 2 billion extra people on the planet over the next 20 years. 97% of that growth will be in a developing world, and therefore we need engineers who can address the problems of the 1 billion rich and the consequences of the problem of the infrastructure, like pollution, for instance, everywhere that you see that, and also the problems of the developing world. This is engineering. How do you engineer this slum area? There's a group of young people there I talked to from a university, I don't remember. They say they have a great vision on the engineering of a landfill in developing countries. A landfill is, there are some landfills in Venezuela, in Caracas, where I was reading that there's a real mafia that works around the landfill. There's a boss there, and there are some sub-bosses on all that stuff there. How do you engineer a landfill? Landfill is a wealth of there's lots of resources there. How do you use those resources? How do you use them and bring them back, essentially, into the community? But how do you design something like this? This is an engineering problem. People live in there, are born in there, die in there, drink the water that comes upstream of it, which I can guarantee you is not very good, and essentially dump some even dirtier water on the way out. That's the challenge. Sustainable community development. That's the way I see, for instance, Engineers Without Borders going. Not just bringing a pump here, a solar panel there. Anybody can do that. You don't need to be an engineer to do that. But let's try to do sustainable community development. Community development that is grassrooted, that at grassroots level, that really empowers the people, that creates jobs, and get people out of poverty their own way. So this is a picture of the world at night, obviously a compounded picture because the world is not at night all at once. Just a side remark there. And you can see that, I mean, there are some places, lots of work for electricians on this planet, and for electrical engineers, not only for electrical engineers, but for civil engineers and so on. Look at the African continent, I tell you that if I put my dot right there, there's probably a child there who is using a flashlight to do his homework or her homework, who has dreams, who has hope, who really wants to make the world a better place. Let's give that child a chance. Let's make this world a better place by giving that child some unique opportunities that we can duplicate around the entire planet. So there are huge opportunities here. Again, 5 billion people. If you think about the market point of view, 5 billion people whose job is to try to stay alive by the end of the day. We go to the moon, we have all that fancy technologies, yet we don't have a simple technology that we can sell for 50 cents to 5 billion people. That's $2.5 billion profit there. Wow, not bad. And the next week, let's devise a system that provides electricity for those 5 billion people that we sell at 50 cents, that cost us 25 cents, another $2.5 billion. Hey, there's wealth out there, not poverty. Wealth in terms of human capital, human resources, human creativity. Look at the world in abundance, not in scarcity. Let's get rid of this term of poverty reduction. There's wealth and plenty of wealth. It is our job to essentially create that synergy, make that wealth even wealthier, and make those people out of poverty. We need a new generation of engineers. We need to re-engineer engineering. That's one way of looking at it. We need to reinvent not only the human, but we also need to reinvent the engineer. It's time that engineers are no longer providers of technical solutions. We have done a pretty good job at it over the past 150 years during the Industrial Revolution. Look at life expectancy in the United States. It went from about 47 years of age 100 years ago to 77 today. Not bad, in great part due to engineers, progresses in engineering, in hygiene, in water, sanitation, but also in medical advances. Well, let's do that for the rest of the world. And again, in Afghanistan, a few days ago there, where I was there, well, they were telling me that 80% of the families in Afghanistan make less than $2 a day, and 40% of the families make less than $1 a day, and life expectancy is around 40 or 42 for men and women, as I say. That's where the challenge is. Not increasing life expectancy of the 1 billion rich, that's a luxury. It's more increasing the life expectancy and the well-being of the 5 billion poor. We need to see engineers as social entrepreneurs and community builders and peacemakers. Look at what's happening with Israel and Palestine there. And I remember that I had been in communication with Amadei first, who studied Engineers Without Borders, Palestine, and then with Adam there. And I went there in December. It was just fabulous. If you have never been to that part of the world there, there's so much hope there. There's so much good that can be done. And as engineers, I think we have the right people to do it. See, politicians had the chance to do it. They blew it. Economists, you don't listen to economists. They talk and they talk and they talk. And of course, nothing comes out of those guys. We, the engineers, we are the bottom of the food chain, right? It's our chance there. In fact, a colleague of mine who talked to one of the ministers, secretaries in Israel, told me that the government of Israel will not be opposed to any joint work between young Palestinians and young Israelis, especially engineers, they said. Oh, engineers, they're harmless. Then those guys are the bottom of the food chain. Don't worry, they're not going to do anything bad, you know. So it's nice to be at the bottom of the food chain once in a while, because we can do something there. And I think that I'm really hopeful that what Amer and Adam are trying to do there is going to be successful. And we need to help them in that vision, in carrying that vision forward and making it happen. And there are many ways we can do that. And I'm committed really to making it happen and go there to Palestine and Israel as many times as possible this year to get the joint projects started. But at the core of this kind of engineering is really what we call appropriate and sustainable technology, small-scale technology that helps protect the environment, that uses local skills, that paves the way for a better future for the community, that is affordable, that helps people earn a living, that meets people's needs, and ultimately, it is a technology with a human face. And look at this quote from Schumacher: find out what people do and help them do it better. Don't do it for them. They are smart. People are smart at the middle of Africa. They have been around for thousands of years. I'm not going to go to see the Mayans and tell them how to build temples. They've done that for about 1,500 years or something like that. So why not we use the know-how, the skills of the people, and essentially work in partnership with them. Remember, the mission of Engineers Without Borders is not to help. Engineers Without Borders is not charity. I'm against charity. Engineers Without Borders is partnership. Get what people know and help them do it better. And in fact, we can even think about learning from people from the developing world, so-called developing world, and bring some of those solutions back here. It's a two-way street, it's not a one-way street. Look at this technology, it's called the Bogo Lights. I'm going to show you a few examples. This technology was invented by a guy from Texas there, and it's a small light there. It's called Bogo because you buy one, you get one. You give one, so that's what he does. You buy one through him, and he gives one to a community there. It has a little solar panels. It provides essentially energy for about 4 or 5 hours, and it comes in 2 different colors. Why? It has to do with gender, because when that guy started giving those Bogo lights to women in developing countries, the man would grab them. So he said, hey, no man on this planet will grab something that is pink. And therefore, we're going to make some pink ones for the women. And guess what? It works. That to me is just, it's not engineering as usual. It's engineering with a twist there, with a spin there. And the guy's not even an engineer, by the way. And it works. I mean, for a woman to carry a light there can save her life. In many refugee camps during the Afghanistan war there with Pakistan, many women were raped on the way to going to the bathroom because they did not have light. A light there can help essentially women for protection and so on. You can even think, imagine on that light you have another button, and I don't think it has that button, an SOS type of button. So if you know, like for your car there, you have the panic button, which I hate. I mean, that panic button drives me nuts. I don't know why the Japanese always come up with a panic button. But in this case, there must be something in the local culture there. But in this case, having a panic button where the thing starts flashing or what have you there, you know that the woman is in danger. That's that little spin there that you add to the technology that makes it really useful, and that can be understood by someone at the middle of nowhere. Cellular Phones, read this book. You can hear me now. That's a great book to read about the cellular phones. The author says that by 2010, 2 years from now, there will be 1 billion extra cellular phones on the market. And 80% of those cellular phones will be in a developing world, really completely changing the way people are interacting. Between a farmer at the middle of Peru there and the person in a big city who is going to buy the wheat, there's no middleman anymore. That farmer can call the guy in the big city and say, what's the price of wheat today? He or she is not going to be ripped off in between, essentially. Things like that, or money transfer. All of a sudden, there's no cash. The transfer is done through the cellular phone. A great book to read. Please read that book. And he talks a lot about some experiences in Bangladesh. In 1997, there was 1 phone per 500 families in Bangladesh. 10 years later, there's 1 phone for 7 families. 1 billion extra cellular phone coming on the market within the next 2 years, 80% in the developing world. Now, if you're in the business of cellular phone, you're going to be rich. Talking about the market, if you want to think about the market. Doing well by doing good there. Here's another example, some additional statistics here, an example of Tidal Pumps. That's a Tidal Pump. That's not much to it. We do this kind of exercise in our gyms there. But for this lady here, it's one way of pumping water and producing better irrigation and better crop. Tidal Pump, here's an example, $7 million of investment. The output was $100 million over a period of 5 years. Not bad for this kind of technology. How often can we see something like this there that really has a big output? Another project that some students of mine are doing there, it's called Telemedicine, Teleeducation in Peru. There's a lodge here, there's a hospital there, and for a total cost of $15,000, 3 transmission towers, the people here can talk face-to-face with a doctor here, also through the internet. The kids there in the small school can talk face-to-face to a teacher here. Total cost of that system, $15,000. That can be implemented anywhere. In fact, in In a few months from now, I'll be in Nepal, and we have a team at the University of Colorado that will install an intranet link, not internet, intranet link between a hospital and a clinic. There's a direct line of sight. Cost of the system is about $5,000. A doctor in a clinic there will, some health expert in a clinic will be able to talk to a doctor essentially 5 hours away by foot. They can tell you that I've done that hike there back and forth, and it is hot and humid in Nepal in the summertime, and the concept of shortcut there is a real shortcut. They don't go like this. They say, boom, straight down and straight up. And imagine being sick and doing that. Well, that can be avoided at a total cost of about $5,000 to $10,000 with this simple technology that we have today. Finally, another example here of a technology that's 4 days old. Using trash in Afghanistan, I started a business this week with some colleagues of us using trash. Imagine using briquettes. Some of you know what it is. It's a well-known technology there. Investment for making this press there, $50. We went to a local welder. 3 hours later, he had it built. He did not have a degree, he did not have a BS degree, he did not need CAD design, he did not need drawings. We did a drawing, and that kid who has fifth grade education was able to put that system together. And now, essentially what we do is that I did some scavenging. Here I am, a PhD doing scavenging of paper in the middle of Kabul. I was into the trash there picking up paper, sawdust, leaves, twigs, straw, anything that burns, right? And you compress it, you make a paste out of it, you put it into that machine. It looks like a middle-aged machine, but believe me, and then you can make some briquettes, something like this. This is a briquette that consists of about 30% sawdust and 70% trash paper, zero cost. Literally, it's the kind of stuff that you get in Kabul for free. A family essentially needs about 20 of those briquettes for cooking and heating per day. And a group of 6 people can make 800 of them per day. In fact, we did the math, we did the business plan. A group of 6 to 8 people can make $300 of profit per month when they have a salary of $30 a month. Factor of 10. For someone who makes $1 a day, imagine coming along with a technology where that person makes $2 a day. You are doubling, essentially, the power of that person. It's not much. Or someone makes $2 a day here. I mean, here those people are making, here they can make now $10 a day instead of $1 a day using that type of technology. I was on my way back to the airport in Kabul there through the security and so on. The guy called me and said, hey, I got my first order there. A lady came along and she is ordering 10 of those machines there for handicapped, for lepers, for kids who have been victims of explosions, who have one leg missing. You can do it with one arm. You can create your own little company. I fell in love with this kind of technology, and we will make briquettes there. And we also introduced a small cooking oven there, and you can cook inside with no fume coming out of it using those briquettes. And that's the gentleman, that's the inventor of that cooking oven, Sanukaji Shrestha. And again, those pictures were taken a few days ago in Kabul. So the challenge that I see there, and I'm almost done, the challenge that I see there is that we need to reinvent engineering practice and engineering education. It is no longer, it's out of sync with the reality as we are living today in a more globalized world. We need the education of engineers and scientists, and non-engineers, by the way, who have the skills and tools to address critical world issues. We live in a globalized world. We need globalized engineers. We need engineers who can speak 2 or 3 languages. Engineers who can work in complex areas like 130 degrees weather. It's okay. You take big naps. Nothing wrong about taking a nap. In fact, we don't take enough naps. That's why we are so screwed up. That's something I've learned in the world, that many people take naps. In fact, 3/4 of the people on the planet take naps. It's only us who give me a cup of coffee, run. Well, maybe some people have some solutions for us. Maybe we don't need Prozac and all that stuff. Maybe just a nap during the day might not be a bad idea. Hey, have you thought about it? Okay, so We need engineers who are trained to assess, design, implement, and monitor projects in developing communities, and you have seen some fantastic examples. Again, I want to commend all the young people in the audience, and not as young people there, for all the projects that you are doing around the world. You are walking the talk. You are doing non-traditional engineering. You are the pioneers. And 20 or 30 years from now, people will look at you and say, well, those guys were walking the talk. They are doing a different type of engineering that is really benefiting people. I heard that Engineers Without Borders has helped about 1 million people around the planet since it was created. Fantastic. How often can you say that you have helped 1 million people on the planet? Let's make it 1 billion 5 years from now, right? Why not? Well, it's exponential, right? Education of engineers who are flexible and resourceful enough to deal with unfamiliar equipment and approaches. And for those of you who went to the field, you know what I'm talking about. Again, duct tape can take a different dimension in the middle of the jungle. It's amazing what you can do with duct tape in the middle of the jungle in Belize that you cannot do in Boulder, Colorado. Our system thinkers, you need to think as again, this is no longer providing clean water, providing energy, providing education. This is sustainable community development. How do we create healthy? The bottom line, why are we trying to do the work we're doing right now, is to create healthy and safe communities. That's the bottom line. That's the end result. There are many ways of doing it, and engineering is obviously part of it. So is health, and so is business development. Social entrepreneurship. In May, I will be in Nepal. There we have a workshop with the Ashoka Fellows. We have 42 Ashoka Fellows, and we are bringing as many of them as possible in downtown Kathmandu, and we're going to exchange notes about social entrepreneurship, how to create small businesses there, like the case of the press there. With a $50 investment, you can make 800 briquettes a day, and you make a profit of $300 by the end of the month. These are simple solutions that are available. So we need system thinkers who can look at the big picture, not just the trees, but we also have to be able to look at the entire forest. We need engineers who have access to contemporary technology and have the humility to understand that the developed world doesn't have all the answers, and that's very important. I mean, for a long time, it was called colonialism and neo-colonialism. The white man would come over and say, you do this and you do that and so on. That led, obviously, to a lot of failure. In fact, I was reading that $25 trillion have been spent on this kind of engineering over the past 50 years without much success. So we need to work in partnership with the local people and accept that, hey, our projects fail. If you don't accept failure, then replace it by lessons learned, okay? In Engineers Without Borders, don't go into Engineers Without Borders projects, please. You'll be very frustrated. Then you'll need Prozac, and then Engineers Without Borders will have to have a doctor on board and so on to deal with all those frustrated individuals. No, you have to accept lessons learned and move forward. It's 5 steps forward, 3 steps backward, in my opinion. When you are at that level, it's a very successful project. In the case of Afghanistan, I can tell you it's 5 steps forward and 4 steps backward, sometimes 6 steps backward. But you've got to move forward. And that's part of the engineering that we are talking about here, engineering for the developing world. And again, a quote here of Albert Einstein, talking about the need for changing our mindset. The significant problems we face cannot be solved with the same level of thinking that created them. We need a new mindset. New mindset in terms of engineering education, how we help those in the developing world, how we work in partnership with them, in engineering practice, quality control as quality assurance, quality control. What is quality control and quality assurance at the middle of the jungle? What represents sustainable technologies in the developing world? A lot of people talk about sustainability, but we don't have a clue of what it is. In fact, 1 minute, I was reading last time a story about the Buddha, and the Buddha, he was asked, what is enlightenment? And the Buddha said, well, enlightenment is the end of suffering, but the Buddha never said what is enlightenment. It's the same thing about sustainability. What is sustainability? It's the end of trashing the planet, essentially. But it doesn't tell you what is sustainability. So there's you can hear this. I'm quoting the Buddha, so it cannot much be right. But think about it. There are many ways. Sustainability is not something. Sustainability is not something. In other words, that there are many constraints. We know when we see something that is not sustainable. We know when we don't see enlightenment, but we don't know how to define it. And that's the most frustrating part of sustainability. What does it mean in the developing world? I don't have a clue, but I know when it is not sustainable, that's for sure. So I want to finish my presentation with this beautiful picture of children. This picture was taken in Nepal several years ago, where two students went over there and and built a photovoltaic computer in a small village in Nepal there. And those children are watching the monitor of the computer. That, to me, is the message that I want to send to you. Ultimately, essentially, all of us are called to make this world a better place. All of us are called to bring smiles like this. Believe me, if you can bring smiles like this to the refugee camp in Palestine or to some of the refugee camps also in Israel, they won't need AK-47, Kalashnikov, and all that stuff. That's the future, and that's what Engineers Without Borders is all about. So in conclusion, walk the talk. Be the change that we want to see in the world. Be social activists. We need to denounce inequities. We need to denounce poverty. We need to denounce child abuse. We need to denounce the things that are breaking our hearts. All of us have that power of compassion, and it's time that we merge compassion and action. I think, to me, the work of Engineers Without Borders is driven by my heart. It's not driven by my head. And the world is driven by the top 3 inches of the head right now. Let's bring the heart into the equation. And all of you, I'm sure, that are driven by compassion, otherwise you would not be here. But it's very important that you acknowledge that. Concept of love, compassion, peace. These are terms that we don't often talk about in engineering schools. In fact, love is a word that it's a 4-letter word that we don't talk about on campus. And we talk about other 4-letter words, but not that one. But it's very important that we acknowledge that we are essentially kind beings, we are compassionate beings, and that we need to put that compassion in action. As engineers, we are in a unique position for doing that. And so let's walk the talk, and let's make the world a better place. Thank you.